how hard you hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward.
To infinity and beyond!
Some people without brains do an awful lot of talking, don't they?
It's classified.
You talking to me?
I could tell you, but then I'd have to kill you.
I can't fly!
Expecto Patronum!
Entertainment X.
You never know what you're going to get.
For this conversation, I chat on the phone with Dave Foxx. Dave is in Austin, Texas, and I'm in Long Island, New York. We have a lovely conversation about his career. He's the voice of Z100, and we talk about paying it forward, teaching others the tricks of the trade instead of doing it yourself. You'll see what I mean when you listen to the episode. He also shares stories of the radio, working in New York City, and all of the work he does at home or for around the world. And he touches on doing what you love. These are just some of the highlights of the conversation. There's so much more in our chat. So I hope you enjoy this episode, and keep on keeping on. We are back with another episode of Entertainment X, and today with me on the phone is Dave Foxx. Dave, how you doing?
I'm well, with two X's, I might add.
Yes, with
it's
two
Entertainment
X's.
XX this time, so something like that.
Oh, that's perfect. That's perfect. And you're down in Austin, Texas, and I'm over here in beautiful Long Island, New York.
Long Island.
Yeah, forget about it.
Many a lovely afternoon in Long Island.
Oh, yeah. Very good. Where?
Well, mostly out towards Levittown. There's I have a couple of friends who live out there, and I would go out for pool parties and whatnot from time to time.
Oh, okay.
And they also had beach houses further out towards Montauk, and I would go out and join them out there and spend a couple days on the beach. It's an absolutely beautiful place. Love it.
Yeah, it's gorgeous. I'm spending some time out here. I was going to say I'm doing some time out here, but that makes it sound like I'm in prison.
Yeah, Rahway is a different experience altogether.
We'll save that for another time.
Yeah.
So I want to hop right into these questions. I want to talk to you about your mother and what she taught you about paying it forward.
My mom was an actress. Before I was born, she was actually being courted by MGM Studios to become the next ingenue to become a part of their star-making machine. Wow. Each year they would invest a lot of money and effort into an actress, put her in several films, and give her key roles so that they could make her into a star, and then she would become the so-called property of MGM. That's how they did business back then. And she was actually ready to sign, pen in hand, when she put the pen down and said, no, I want to have a family, and this is a really crappy place to raise kids. So she left. They said you'd never work again. They were wrong. And, I mean, she never made a movie, but she acted a lot. She was my dad was in the Air Force, so we traveled a lot, and everywhere we went, she would either start or become part of the local community theater, and within a few months, she would be running the whole place. She was just that good. She was an amazing actress. When my dad was stationed in Texas, in Fort Worth, she belonged to a community theater group there, based out of the Scott Theater, which is still there, by the way.
Wow.
Beautiful theater based on the Guthrie design, Guthrie Theater up in Minneapolis. And I actually got a job there doing tech work. I worked on the sets and lights and sound and stuff. I did some backstage stage managing and things like that. And every once in a while, I'd get a bit part where I'd come out and say a few words, and then I was done. Well, there was one time they put on Tennessee Williams' Summer and Smoke. And there was a point at which this young actress was supposed to cry, and she just could not turn on the tears. You know, she couldn't turn on the waterworks at all.
Yeah.
And just kind of a basic skill for a really good actress. And otherwise, this girl was really good. She was attractive. She had great moves on stage. She had great stage presence, but she just could not turn on the waterworks. And they were in dress rehearsal, and the director got very frustrated. He says, "Why no tears? Why, why, I just, your crying is not believable." And my mom, who was also in the play, just walked out onto the stage, put her arm around the girl's shoulder, and walked backstage and spent about 10, 15 minutes with her. Girl came out, and the waterworks were on. She could cry instantly. And she then went to my mom afterwards, and she just said, "I cannot thank you enough." She taught her how to bring up those emotions, and in a very short period of time. And she said, "How in the world will I ever repay you?" And she just said, "Someday, someplace, some young actor or actress is going to have difficulty with something that you know how to do, and you will then teach them the way I have taught you." Now, in modern terms, the movie Pay It Forward, that's how we know it now. But that's just the way life was for her. You're part of a community, and you help others, and you help them grow and help them develop. And I have taken that into my life. My boss at the Scott Theater, his name was Jack Ellis, wonderful guy, but he had the same attitude, and he taught me so very much. When it would have probably been just easier for him to do something, he would teach me how to do it. And I've taken that attitude with me forward in life, because it's not just the right thing to do. It's so very fulfilling when you do it and you see somebody take something that you've given them and turn it into something really positive and big and growing and everything. And then it is the best feeling in the world. And so that became my sort of mode of operation, if you will, for my whole career. I loved having interns. I loved teaching them the fundamentals. I loved showing them how to think for themselves, something that I find is all too often missing in a lot of young broadcasters. A lot of people get into broadcasting because it looks easy, and it is if you have certain skills. But they didn't have those skills, and so they couldn't understand why they couldn't make any progress. And once I was able to show, several of my interns have since gone on to become big players, maybe not major players, but big players in the broadcast business, becoming program directors and producers and creative services people. And it's very gratifying. It really is. As much as I'm thrilled with the accomplishments that I've had, I feel magnified by a power of 10 with the accomplishments that they've had.
Yeah, and I can understand that, because it feels so good to give.
Absolutely. And you end up, it may not seem like it on the surface, but you end up getting a lot more than you give.
Yeah, that's very true.
My other big philosophy is that I am constantly learning. I still learn. I don't learn as often as I used to, because I've seen so much and done so much. But I always, I write a monthly column for Rap Magazine, and I get emails from time to time from people who say, "I loved your column about this, and you talked about this particular subject. Let me share with you a way that I have to do that." And inevitably, it's something that's smoother and easier, and and so I end up gaining again. It's a terrific feeling to, and each time I pay it forward, I find that it comes back to me in an even better way.
That's incredible, because that's you could call that karma.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in karma, and no, she's not a bitch.
What did your parents teach you about work ethic?
Well, probably to my detriment in some cases at least, work is all that counts. You know, I mean, leisure time is great, but what makes leisure time delicious is the fact that you've worked.
Yeah.
You know, my philosophy with my kids has always been choose a career doing something that you really like to do. It may not seem like it's going to pay much or you're not going to go far with it, but if you really like to do it, you're going to become very good at it. And when you're very good at it, you're going to make money. You know,
Yeah.
don't make money the goal. Money is not the goal. Being really good at what you do is the goal. Because if you are really good at what you do, the money comes all by itself. You don't have to go and slave for it.
Yeah.
So my work ethic has always been, and I got this directly from my dad and my mom, because my mom, when she was acting or when she was being a comptroller for the Air Force or something, she gave it her all. Not to the detriment of anything else, but, you know, when she was there, she was there.
Yeah.
When she was acting, she was really doing it, and she became a character so thoroughly and so completely. I remember one of the plays that she did in Fort Worth was called A Delicate Balance by Edward Albee.
Yeah. Okay.
It's a very, very dark story. And she played the part of the matriarch who was an alcoholic. And my mother did not drink. She didn't drink a drop of alcohol her entire life. But she became that character so completely that for 6 months after the play closed, she was still difficult to be around. Not impossible, and you know, and there were flashes of the old mom, but 6 months later, she finally put it aside, put it down, and she, you know, but she became that character so completely that it was almost scary. She became a different person. That's just the way she worked. You know, it's a mental place more than anything else. So when it came to doing production, when it came to being a jock on the air, I was 100% there all the time. There was just nothing else that was as important when I was doing that. Now, when I was home, it was different. But work is, and if you really love what you're doing, there's a story I remember from when I was probably in the 6th grade about a village of kids in Switzerland. And as kids everywhere do, they would go out in the early part of the day and start playing, and they would stay out all day until the sun was going down and parents were calling. And on the way out to play, they went past a clockmaker's shop, and he was in there working on clocks, making clocks, building clocks. And when they would come back at dusk, he was still there, working on clocks and making clocks. And one of the kids finally got up the gumption to go in and talk to him and say, "Why do you work all the time?" And he looked at them and he just laughed. He said, "I don't work. This is something I love to do." Loving what you do for a job will get you much further than anything else. And then it's not work anymore, you know?
It's
I
playing.
used to tell people when I was working in New York, what's not to like about this job? I go into a darkened room, play with toys all day, and every 2 weeks they give me money. This is the best.
Yeah.
So, you know, and that's the thing. And I give the same advice to every kid I run into who has the brains to ask. You know, just do what you love. Don't worry about becoming a doctor or lawyer for your mom and dad's sake. I mean, if that's something you love, that's great. That's terrific. But do what it is that you love. And if you love it, it will pay dividends down the road.
Now, I want to talk about your path through college, because you tried a bunch of different stuff before you came upon radio. And
Yeah.
so, like, this is a large question. Beginning with it, was it difficult? Did you find a lot, like, were you less than happy or depressed as you were finding this? Or was it all just like earnest, I'm going to try each thing and figure it out?
It was mostly earnest. there were times when I would get really dark and just think to myself, there's got to be more to life than this.
Yeah.
Especially when I was going down the wrong path. It's kind of funny when you're starting to pursue a career and you're starting to go down that path, you get to know pretty quickly whether or not it's a good fit. And the thing about colleges, of course, is once you decide to do a certain thing, to become a certain major, you have to make a commitment of at least a semester or 2 semesters in order to find out, what's going on. But within, 5 or 6 weeks, you know good and well that it's not something you ever want to do. So I would have to make these commitments, and then I would be stuck with these classes that I had to do because I did drop a few classes as time went by. I ended up going to school for 7 years and never got a degree.
Wow.
Because it just, I would drop enough things, and they would be kind of basic things that I'd end up having to either go back and take for something else, like statistics. God, I hated statistics. That was torture to me.
Yeah.
But even in radio, you need to know statistics if you want to interpret Arbitron and the things that they do.
It's true.
God, there was, I think, if I recall correctly, there were like 6, maybe 7 different majors that I did. And I can remember some of them, of course. I started out, I wanted to be an actor, like my mom. And I frankly got bored with it. Something I had been doing for several years, working with my mom at the Scott Theater and previous. And I just got to a point where I felt like I don't want to be saying other people's words. I'd rather express myself.
Huh.
So, and the thing is, I went to Brigham Young University, and they have a great drama program there, a really amazing program. And if you get into cinematography, they had, at the time, I don't know what they have now, but at the time they had 2 gigantic sound stages where you could make movies, real movies.
Oh, wow.
And it was just, it was phenomenal. The guest lecturer my first year there, I got so excited, was Carl Malden. Now, not everyone listening to this is going to know that name right off the bat, but if you look him up on Google, he was a pretty big star, mostly in supporting roles over the years in movies. He finally got into television with Michael Douglas. The 2 of them were in a show called Streets of San Francisco. And they had just wrapped up that show when he agreed to do this guest lecture thing at BYU. And I was so excited to go see him. And he got up there and started talking about how hard it was and how much work it was. And I was kind of disillusioned. I was like, no, this is supposed to be fun. This is supposed to be something that's just a lark. And he disabused me of that notion pretty quickly. So I wandered away from drama and went to my second love, which was marine biology.
Now, how did you switch gears so quickly? Because some kids stay in college for 4 years doing the same thing, and they don't, like these days, I feel like people my age don't figure this stuff out until they graduate. So
yeah,
how did
true.
How did you turn so quickly?
Well, when I was growing up, my favorite TV show was a show called Sea Hunt. It starred Lloyd Bridges, who is, yes, of that family. He is the dad of Jeff and God, his name escapes me just at the moment. Bo Bridges,
Okay.
Jeff and Bo Bridges. He's their dad, and I used to love that show. He'd put on the scuba gear and he'd go down, and there'd be some kind of a fight scene or something several times underwater.
Wow.
Now, I've seen episodes since then, and I realized it was a really cheesy show, but it really sparked my imagination. And so the whole concept of going underwater and, working underwater, that just always fascinated me, the whole scuba thing. By the time I got to college, I went on my first scuba trip and discovered that it's cold. It's really cold down there. And when I decided to do marine biology, this was before I took my scuba trip, when I decided to do marine biology, the idea was, and here I was chasing money, because I knew it was going to be a big thing. Ecology was just becoming a catchword. And I decided that I would do environmental surveys for oil companies, which requires that you go out and you survey reefs and ocean bottom to see, where these oil rigs are going to go. And you have to determine what kind of an impact putting an oil rig in a certain place is going to have. That was the idea. Then I went scuba diving. Didn't really care for it as much as I thought I would. And Dr. Braithwaite, who was my advisor in marine biology, he expected me to remember the names of all these little animals that I was going to encounter down there. And it was just like, that's too much like just learning by rote.
Yeah.
I just didn't, it lost its fascination for me. So
now,
that was kind of the end of that.
Right. And I want to do some jumping around here, if it's all right with you. So we're going to do
Sure.
We're going to go back and forth and back and forth. Now, I want to hop to the end of your 7 years at college. Was that an immediate decision to drop it, or was that like 3 additional years in the making?
It was a couple years in the making. I had gotten a job at the radio station on campus, doing classical radio, and I thought I was above the normal riffraff in the radio business because, I understood classical music. I'd studied piano for 15 years.
Wow.
And after a while, it was like I knew more than a lot of my professors about the realities of radio.
Okay.
It's not to say that they weren't smart. They were. I can even tell you the names of several of them. I named my second oldest child after one of them. His name was Dallas Anderson. Great guy and smart guy. But there were things that he just didn't get about the radio business that I understood viscerally.
Like what?
At the deepest level. It's not about your education. It's about what can you do for me? What have you done lately? It's about ratings. They don't really, you go into any radio station in the world and ask people what they majored in school, and I can almost guarantee you, now looking back, I can definitely guarantee you that 90% of them are going to say things like library science, computer science, humanities, art, just everything, anything except radio television.
Huh.
And I looked at the curriculum for radio television majors and realized that 90% of what they have to teach you, they can teach you inside of 6 weeks if you apply yourself. I mean, it's, knowing today's college students, it might take a little longer. Only because,
shoot.
They've got parties to go to.
Yeah, we got to keep those parties going now. Yeah.
But, and there's nothing wrong with parties. I'm not saying awful things about people. But, and it just seemed like 4 years of that. 4 years, and it brings to mind another phrase that my dad used to use. He says he's packing 10 pounds of crap into a 5-pound bag, only this time it's the other way around. He's packing 2 pounds of crap into a 20-pound bag.
Oh, wow.
It's just kind of empty.
Yeah.
That you learn a lot more by doing it, by being around people who are doing it, than you ever can from a book or from a lecture.
Now, when you got into the radio station, was there a disc jockey or host that you idolized, looked up to, mimicked, copied, anything to create your own voice, style, flair, that kind of thing?
No, not really. I made very good friends with the guy who was doing afternoons. His name was Brian Capener. But he had no interest in radio. He was doing it just to support himself. He was a cinematography student. Oh. And he went on, he makes movies. He's still making movies. But his is not a name that most people would know. But in terms of, I looked outside my radio station, and in fact, outside my state, frankly. My big dream, the guy I idolized probably the most was Chuck Bloor. Who just was an amazing creative mind. In terms of on-air people, it was the usual cast of characters from Larry Lujak to Don Imus and George Michael at WABC. I loved his rap. You know, and I used to subscribe to a service called Air Checks. It's still around. I don't know that it's even the same company, but they do air checks from different markets, and they send out files each month. At the time, they would send out cassettes, and so I would get an air check from San Diego and listen to Shotgun Tom Kelly or Charlie Tuna or some of the other big names at the time. And so that's kind of where I got most of my inspiration, was outside my own immediate radio business. But at the same time, I was there to learn, and I had a pretty good grasp of it. And when I realized how empty the curriculum was for the amount of time that they wanted you to spend on it, I just said, this is not very smart, so I decided to call it quits. 7 years after I'd started as an actor, I left as a radio geek, and I've never looked back.
So looking at the radio industry is in terms of like relationships, it's a small group, I'm gathering. And that more or less you know everyone, or you know someone of someone. It's like a 2 degrees of separation, kind of like, I guess, the theater industry is. And
almost always.
And what did you learn? So what did you learn about relationships as you jumped into the professional radio market?
Relationships are everything. Like many businesses, it's not what you know, it's who you know.
Yeah.
You know, my career, I've only worked really at 4 radio stations my entire life. The one I was working, 5 if you count the one in college. I left the station at the college to go across town to KOVO, little AM daytimer. Well, it wasn't a daytimer, but it might as well have been, because they cut their power at night. It was a little AM station. I went from there to Washington, D.C. to work in WPGC in its heyday, when it was really huge. Then I went to Baltimore for 6 months, worked at B104. It's now Z104. And then I left from there to go to WHTZ, the mighty Z100, back in 83, and stayed, and just kept staying. And it was funny, when I left Washington, technically I was leaving Baltimore, but I got married right before we moved up to New York, because she didn't want to move up and live in sin. But that's another story. She insisted we have a wedding. So I invited all my radio buddies, and they were all there. And I remember one fellow, the late Walt Starling. He was a traffic guy. He'd worked at WASH for years and worked at WPGC for a time, and I'd gotten to know him pretty well. And he said, but after you go to New York, what's left? Where do you go from there? And I just turned around and looked at him and said, anywhere I want.
Yes, you did.
Yeah, I did. And they all laughed. They thought it was great fun. But I got up there. I had promised my wife it was going to be like a 2-year gig, and then we could go someplace and just settle down and be a family and do all of that stuff.
Yeah.
But, man, New York is New York, and it just kept sucking me back in. And it wasn't until I just got to a point where I couldn't deal with the politics anymore that I finally just said, you know what? I don't need this now. I've done what I'm going to do as far as that goes. I've got a column that I'm writing every month. I've got a lot of voiceover clients that I'm, taking care of. I don't need the pressure anymore. So I walked away from the pressure, and life's been good. Life's been really good.
Yes, it has. I love the idea. I love the fact that you're in Austin. You have your studio, and you just send out stuff across the globe, which is that's so cool. And I mean, technology will allow you to do that. When they placed you in production, because I remember you were in a holding pattern prior to New York, right? They had kind of offered you a show, and then there was still a DJ there, and you were in product. They kind of placed you there. Was there a mindset you got yourself into? Were you like, oh, this is my life path? Was there a little bit of like an ego bruiser, Or what was that for you?
No. Yes and no. Honestly, when I was still in college, some friends of mine and I went up to Salt Lake City, which is about a 90-minute, not even a 90-minute, half-hour drive up from where we were in Provo. And one of them knew one of the jocks at KCPX. His name was Skinny Johnny Mitchell. And I'd been listening to him for a couple of years at that point, and I was a big fan. I really thought he was good, and he had a great patter, seemed to have a good energy. And we went up to Broadcast Row, which doesn't even exist anymore, and where the radio station was, and he drove up on his Harley with extended forks and all of that, big chopper.
Yeah.
And he was wearing his leathers with the fringe, and he had long hair and a beard and all this stuff. And he pulls up and parks and starts to go in, and my friend bugs him and says, "Hey, I want you to meet a couple of guys," and everything. I looked at this guy in the face. This guy was old. He was probably at least 40. Oh, my God. And I thought to myself, when I'm 40 years old, I don't want to be sitting on the radio talking to 12-year-old girls.
Yeah.
That would really be a crappy way to live. I don't mean that as an indictment against folks who have done that, because a lot of really great people have had great careers doing just that. But it was just something that was never for me. And so when I went to New York, this was going to be my last on-air gig. I had no idea what I was going to do afterwards. But I did not want to be that 40-year-old guy. At the time, I was about 30 years old.
Yeah.
So I figured this is going to be my last gig on the radio. Well, I got up there, and through a mix-up, the operations manager and the program director were doing different things at different times. The operations manager hired me while the program director was renegotiating the contract with the gal who was doing middays. And so when I got there, Steve Kingston, the operations manager, had to say, well, kind of embarrassedly, cough, cough, there's no job. And he felt guilty because I had quit my job in Baltimore, really done wildly well in the 6 months that I was there. And he said, here, and he put me in a production room, and he said, just do production, because he knew I'd been doing production all along at all the various stations I'd worked at.
Yeah.
And so I sat for a year in that room doing production, mostly commercial stuff. I would fill in from time to time for the imaging guy, J.R. Nelson. And when the year came up, he came and he cracked the door open and stuck his eye in the crack there, and he says, "Come on, Fox, it's time to go." And Susan Lee Taylor, who had been doing middays and whose contract had been extended a year when I got there, had decided she wanted to become a program director down in the Carolinas. She had her opportunity, and she was ready to go. She had no interest in staying to be a jock at Z100. And it was like a snap decision right then. I had not made up my mind that way at all. But as soon as he said, "We're ready, I want you to go on the air," I looked at him and I said, "No."
Oh, wow.
I'm really enjoying doing production. I'm really enjoying being the production guy. I mean, for one thing, I have regular office hours. I don't have to come in at night. I don't have to come in over the weekend. I don't have to do any of that crap. For the other thing is, if I make a mistake, I can fix it.
Yeah.
When you're a jock, if you make a mistake, it's out there for God and everybody to see. It's like there's no taking it back. And both of those things kind of appeal to me. Plus, I felt like I was being a lot more creative, which is my main motivator when it comes to doing anything. I felt I was being much more creative in the production studio than I ever would be on the air. And he was kind of put out about it. He was frankly angry. But they ended up making a couple of quick moves, and they brought somebody else in to do afternoons, moved the afternoon person down into middays, and I stayed on doing production. And it was that aha moment, that I realized this is what I really am supposed to be doing. Being a jock is fine and all that, and it's fun, but this is a place where I have a chance to really be creative and really take control of my own destiny. And I did.
In production, was there or is there a favorite line you've ever said?
Well, there are actually several, and they're probably all going to flee my brain as soon as I try to call any of them up.
You could just say yes.
Yeah, there
And if
are.
it comes,
There were.
it's all good.
There are things, I had to learn a lot. I had to grow a lot when I became a full-time producer. I had to learn that my life is not at the beck and call of everyone else. I'll answer to my boss, sure, that's a given. But when you have AEs wandering in and saying, "Oh, we've got to change this," or you have a jock coming in saying, "Oh, this sounds really sucky on my air, you got to change this," and it's like, no, I learned very early on, point down the hall and say, "Go see Steve. Go see Steve. He's the man." And I would work with people, but I had a sign of Sylvester the cat, with a quote under something like that. "May I suggest you take your silly ass problem down the hall to someone who really cares."
Oh, shoot.
And Steve came in after, this is once I'd made the transition to full-time production guy. I was no longer going to be the jock. He came in and saw that, and he just very gently reached up, took it down, and he said, "Bad attitude. Don't need that." And he was right. It was a bad attitude. Later in life, 30 years in the same radio station is life as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
I learned I started coming in really early for entirely unrelated reasons, but I would come in with the morning show.
Oh.
And even though I wasn't working directly on the morning show, I would do stuff for them from time to time, of course, but I would just come in and get all of my work done. So that when 10 o'clock rolled around, it was awesome, because an AE could walk in screaming and crying and carrying on that he's going to lose this deal if we don't do a certain thing. And I could be very accommodating, and I could say, "Calm down, we'll take care of it, we'll get it done." And I stopped having this reputation as being an ogre and more as someone who really cared about the radio station and really cared about what we were doing as an art form, which was eye-opening to me. It was like, wow, people actually like me now. For a long time, people were afraid to come in and see me because they were going to get their heads snapped off. But once I started that early schedule, and I had the time, and there was no reason not to give it freely, because I was going to be there anyway. So
what is, just for the listeners, AE, what does that stand for?
Account executive, salesperson.
Okay.
They're the people who go out and drum up advertisements for the radio station, which of course is how we all get paid.
Right.
And they, one of my favorite phrases is AEs. You can't live with them, you can't kill them.
Oh my God. Yeah.
AEs, they over-traumatize everything. Everything's an emergency. But, I have since, in the latter years of my career there, I have since learned, of course, they are the lifeblood of the radio station. Without them, the radio station ceases to exist. And go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to change the topic, so I just want you to finish before I change the topic.
Well, they have illusions of grandeur.
Okay.
They think they can write. They can't, most of them. They think that these are the people who insist that you put a phone number in an ad 7 times. And it's like, you idiot, nobody cares about the phone number. If I'm doing my job correctly, when I do your commercial, they are so hungry to go find out more about it, they'll go look up the phone number. You don't have to give them the phone number. In fact, it's really counterproductive because that's just mumbo jumbo to them.
Now,
get to their heart.
Has that changed? since the internet has become so prevalent, or was that always the case? Like they don't care about the phone number.
That was always the case.
Okay.
And it still is. If people want to know, they'll Google it. If people want to know, they'll find a way to find out more about it if it's something that they're really interested in. And if I'm doing my job, they will be.
Right.
Giving them a phone number is like just stupid. You'll never appeal to anyone intellectually. It has to be emotionally. And if you're getting to them emotionally, you're scoring points. If you try to do it intellectually, you might as well quit and go home. You're done.
Wow. Now, you might have just answered my next question, but I'm going to ask it because maybe you have a different answer. Do you have any themes of top performers in radio?
Top performers in what I do?
Yeah, and what you do in hosting, kind of whatever comes to mind in terms of radio.
There are some people who completely get it, who are on track. The guy who replaced me at Z100, Stax,
Yeah.
Staxx, great guy.
Heard of him.
Really great guy. And he gets it. He totally gets it. All he's doing is imaging. He's not doing any commercial work at all. In the last few years, neither did I. But doing really good commercial work and doing really good imaging is all the same thing. You just have a different client. Imaging work, your client is the PD or the radio station. If you're doing commercial work, you're doing work for other people to have their messages on your radio station. It's just the client is the only difference, and you have to be just as smart for both. Stax gets it. He totally gets it. There are a few people in this business that I would say totally get it. John Frost is one. Eric Chase is one. Kelly Doherty is one. Or if she goes by Kelly. I just call her Kelly because we're on a first-name basis. But anyway, she's one of the people who gets it. There are a few people who totally understand that the way to the listener's heart and their pocketbook is through their heart. It's not through the brain. People who insist on trying to do things intellectually will always fail. It just doesn't work. You can't reason with the audience because first of all, most of them aren't listening.
No.
And when you try to give people phone numbers, what do you think? They're going to sit there and write it down or pull out their phone and start calling? No, they're not going to do either one of those things because they're occupied. 99% of your audience is driving their car, washing the dishes, doing homework, doing other stuff.
The beach.
And you're exactly.
Yeah.
They're at the beach. But and they're not going to get out of, no matter how excited you think this product is, they're not going to get out a thing and write down the phone number. It's just not going to happen because that's intellectual. If you get their heart moving in the right direction, you get them excited about a product or a service, then yes, and they'll turn off the radio if they're that excited, and they'll sit there and do a Google search or they'll look up somebody and they'll find out more about it. And that's your job. That's your only job. Car dealers used to drive me crazy when I was doing commercial work because they expected me to sell the damn cars. And I'm like, no. I'm selling you. I'm selling your dealer. Give me one thing that is great about your dealership that makes your dealership better than all the others, and I will make an entire ad based on that one thing.
Wow.
Then the next time somebody's in the market for a car, they'll think of you because you made an emotional connection.
Yeah.
Trying to sell. No, all I do is get them in the door. Once they're in the door, it's up to you to sell them a car. That's your job, not my job. My job is to sell them on you. And I had a few car dealers who finally really got it, and they went skyrocketing. Their business just like tripled in 1 year, and they knew exactly why, because I had taught them it's not about selling cars. It's about selling you. It's about selling your brand, your service, whatever it is that makes you unique. That's what makes it work. There's a school for writing that's about a stone's throw from my house called the Wizard Academy. For a long time, I thought it was something about Hogwarts, but that's another story. Roy Anderson is a genius when it comes to this stuff. And his classes, while they're not cheap, are worth it to anyone who does write radio copy, because it will teach you this very, very simple concept. Keep it simple, keep it direct, keep it aimed at the heartstrings. If you do that, you'll win every stinking time.
Yeah.
If you try to get to people through their brains, it's just not going to happen, because they're not there.
That's so true. I feel like this has turned into marketing 101, which I love. I just love it. No, it's true. I mean, like my primary thing is musical theater, but it's so true. What makes you unique? What makes you emotionally connected to another person? Because when you have that connection, they'll buy anything, or they'll work with you, or they'll like you.
Yes, exactly. And the next time they need a car, they'll go to your dealership first.
Yeah.
And once they walk in the door, then it's time for you guys to do your job. But, if you I'm there to lay the groundwork. That's it.
Now,
that's all.
You still are laying groundwork at Z100 occasionally? Because I know I'm hearing your voice on that station still.
Oh, my voice is still there. When I left Z, it was with the understanding in my own brain that I would support myself doing voice work. And it was kind of funny when I went in to give notice to Mark Medina, who is still a program director there, really nice guy.
Yeah.
I said, I've done this for 30 years. It's enough. I don't need to do anymore. And he understood. He said, I do have a problem, though. He says, I cannot hear anyone else's voice saying from the top of the Empire State Building.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I smiled and I said, call my agent. We'll make this happen. Yeah. They did. It was a signed deal, and it was like I never left. And so to this day, I listen to Z100 on Sirius XM.
Yeah, me too.
12. And every time I listen, I hear my voice, and I've got grandkids now, and they'll hear it and they go, "That's you."
Yeah.
Then I'll sit there and bask in their glory
and their approval.
yeah, which is kind of hard to come by these days.
You know what? It is. And you worked with Tom Pullman, right? Was he a program director there at C100?
He was, and he, as much, and I've mentioned Steve Kingston, Scott Shannon, Mark Medina, Tom Pullman, and Sharon Daster. The two of them were amazing as program directors. Tom Pullman especially. This is a guy who, he knows how to do production. He did production up at KC 101 in New Haven, Connecticut, and was apparently quite good at it. But he never once tried to give me any kind of instruction or tell me how to do my job. He's one of those really rare managers who understands that it's up to the individual to own their job. And he gives you the tools you need to do it and just lets you loose. He doesn't sit there and try to second-guess you all the time. Yeah. He was an amazing manager and a really, really nice guy. I have nothing but the kindest thoughts for Tom
because
to this day.
He's now upper management at iHeartMedia. And that is, you're still a part of kind of the iHeartMedia family in terms of like the Jingle Ball, right? Or you did host it, or you voice over it?
They have so far brought me back for Jingle Ball in New York. Now, I'm not doing the national tour.
Okay.
Although I've offered to do it a few times, and they just kind of like, well, no. Yeah. This is something for the local station to brand as their own, and I'm not necessarily the voice on those stations, so they say, nah. But I am involved that way. I'm also involved in iHeartRadio's 80s programming efforts. They've got a station in San Francisco that I'm the voice on. iHeart 80s at 103.7. And then I also do voice for the iHeart 80s channel on the iHeartRadio app, iHeartRadio app. I get confused about who's what. But anyway, Ricky Rue is the producer for them, and really nice guy, and does a bang-up job. So I am involved with iHeartMedia, but now as a vendor rather than as an employee.
How do you keep your voice healthy?
My wife would argue that I don't. You know,
You're just in good health.
I am in good health now. I had a heart attack last year at the end of September.
Oh.
And a really serious heart attack, and that changed a lot of things for me. My whole lifestyle has changed. I exercise at least 5 times a week. I'm eating much better, no cholesterol.
Wow, good for you.
And enjoying it. I really like it.
Yeah.
Mediterranean diet is amazing. It's so flavorful and so delicious, and it has 0 cholesterol. So, I'm actually in better health now than I was probably 10 years before I retired from Z.
Yeah.
It's just, you know, life's been good, and now I'm trying to be good to myself with it. But my voice, I'm very fortunate in that the genes were just right, and I have, you know, I do take care of it mostly. I try not to talk too much at night, because when I do, I get, you know, I don't know if you've noticed the change in quality of my voice since we started this interview, but it has changed. It is now, I'm getting a coating on my vocal cords.
I could
I'm
slightly
gonna
hear
have
it.
to go.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to have to go and clear my throat.
What habit or belief have you given up on, and why, if any?
Oh, boy, that's a hard question. I'm not sure I have.
Okay.
Once I got into radio, I'm pretty much doing the same kind. Yeah, I gave up smoking, but that was, you know, that was like 9 years ago. So that, I mean, that's one, but that would be about it. Also, I used to drink a lot when I was first starting out in radio. I was a real party guy, but now you know, it's not that I've quit drinking. I just don't find the occasion as often.
Yeah.
No, life is good. Life's been good for a long time, so why change?
That's great. No, that's really great. Is there a common piece of incorrect advice that you've heard in radio?
There are so many.
The honesty.
One of the things, this gets on a very technical slant, so I'll try to make it brief and as concise as I can. When people talk about compression on music and vocals and things like that in our business, what it does is it reduces the distance between the softest part and the loudest part. You reduce that, and that's compression. And there is one school of thought that says that compression is bad. It gives people headaches. It makes everything sound loud. And I think that's stupid. It's, you know, that's a good thing, especially when you're doing commercials and promos for a radio station. You want it to stand out. You want it to sound louder than the rest. You want it to, you know, even though it's not technically louder, it's the same electrical signals. It's just that there are no soft spots anymore, and it's all very loud. And I think that's mostly hogwash. But that's just, you know, I'll throw that out there. That's one piece of advice that I hear a lot, and I think it's just totally wrong.
Yeah. I mean, no, that's helpful to me because I'm starting to learn a lot about editing and effects and what have you with the podcast. So thank you for that.
Sure. Well, now podcasting's a little different because it's long form. Long form, I would give a little bit on that. I would say, you know, having some more dynamic range is not going to hurt a podcast. You know, but when you've got 30 seconds to get a point across, you make it all as tight as you can.
Yeah. Dave, who are you when you're at your best?
Wow. You had some hard questions here.
I'm sorry. I don't mean for them to be hard. I'm just getting to the soul
They're
and
just
drive.
hard for me. They're just hard for me. I think I am my dad when I'm at my best. He was a smart man. He was a gentleman, had a great sense of humor. When I'm at my best, he was a loving man. You know, and I all of the qualities that I see in myself when I'm at my best were all qualities that my dad had. And, you know, I'm not one of those dad worship kind of guys. It's just kind of how that worked out.
Just fact.
He was a really good guy. It's not hard to see why my mom missed him so much when he died.
Yeah.
I was only 19 when he died.
Okay.
So
I'm glad. I'm not glad you brought I'm sorry about him passing at 19 for you, but I'm glad you say that about him because the older I get, the more I see that with my father. So it's interesting to me that you bring that up.
I think most people do, because you know you look back and unless you had an abusive father or something like that, that's not good. But I think most people look at their father and their mother and see some of the best traits in themselves having come from them. I see that with my mother and my father. And when I'm at my best, I feel like my dad and I would have gotten along so well, even though we didn't at the time he died.
Yeah.
He was pretty critical of what I was doing, but then I would be critical of me too now.
Right. Do you have a favorite failure or a parent failure that might have set you up for success?
Yes. I remember even as late as when I was working at Z100 in the early years, and Tom Pullman was the program director when it changed.
Okay.
I had a massive failure, a brain fart of incalculable size, and left a piece of information out of a promo or something like that. I don't even remember exactly what it was now. But I left it out, and he called me on it. Tom Polk called me on it. And I sat there, and I started to do what I used to do all the time. Cover your ass. Well, I got this information secondhand from so-and-so, blah, 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 blah. And then I thought to myself, no, Tom's not going to buy any of this. And so I just said, you know what? I screwed up. I really screwed up. And he said, fix it. I did. And it was done. And I didn't have to walk around with all the guilt of having really screwed up and trying to push the blame off onto someone else. CYA is the stupidest game that people play in a corporate environment.
CYA?
Don't do that. Own it. Own it. Grow from it.
Yeah.
And I felt my stature in his eyes double that day. And from then on, now if it's my fault, boy, I'll be the first person to tell you. And it's just made life so much simpler. Oh my God. Wow. Walking around with feeling guilty because you may blame somebody else for something that they had nothing to do with. That's a really heavy weight to carry around that I don't need that. I've got other things I need to worry about, things that I've done wrong. And when I own up to them and own them and fix them and make sure I don't do them again, then I feel like I've grown as a human. And that's awesome. It's such a great feeling.
Priceless.
Yes.
Priceless. Do you read books often? Is that something you do?
This is a sore point for me.
Okay. Oh, sorry.
No. It's a great question. I say it's a sore point for me externally. When I read at least one, usually two, sometimes 3 books a week.
Wow.
I read a newspaper every day, even though it makes my blood pressure boil sometimes. I read online incessantly, not Facebook and stuff. That's just jokey stuff. But, news, real news sites and things. I'm an insatiable reader. And I think that if somebody wants to be creative, they must be an insatiable reader.
Agreed.
The last two people who interviewed with me for internships at Z100, I asked them how much they read. And this one girl, I'll never forget her response. She says, "Oh, I never read. It's just too time-consuming. I've got other things to do." And I'm thinking to myself, really? Because creativity is a really simple concept, folks. If Steve Jobs said it best, he said, when somebody comes up with something that's really creative, the creative person gets kind of embarrassed because they realize that all it was is they had they heard one idea from one place, another idea from someplace else. They mashed them together and came up with something entirely new. Yeah. That's what creativity is. That's where the spark happens. And if you're not well read, if you don't understand references that people make to famous authors or famous movies or plays or whatnot, you're not going to get it. You're not going to have that creative spark. It's just never going to happen because life is too big to try to experience everything yourself, and that's why reading is so important. You get an insight into other people's life experiences. So when someone makes a reference to Sartre, or someone makes a reference to, their name's just left my head, musical theater, hello, Gilbert and Sullivan.
Yeah.
You know, if someone makes a reference to something in the Mikado, and you don't know what they're talking about, it's going to sail right over your head. But when you understand those things, it allows you to use that as a sparking point for creativity. Even if you don't designate who it's from, where it's from, that is your spark. That's your place. And when you combine it with something else, then all of a sudden it's, that is a great idea. That's where all the great ideas come from. And if you don't read, you're never going to have them.
Wow.
So I dismissed both of those interns because they gave similar answers. I don't read. I said, well, you're lost.
Reading is...
Thanks for coming.
You're like, well played. Goodbye. Reading is essential. And I really love that you just went on that. You know, you've just explained that. Do you have most gifted books, or like a top book you love, or top 3, or anything that come to mind?
I mostly read fiction, so I wouldn't count most of those, although there are a few that stand out to me. I think my favorite book in terms of nonfiction has been the Steve Jobs book, only because I identified so readily with so much of what he did in his life.
Yeah.
I didn't identify with all of it because not all of it was good, but it was like, wow, this guy and I had kindred souls, you know, in one or more ways. So that book was important to me. There's right now I'm doing something I have done twice before in my life. I read the entire Travis McGee series. And those who don't know Travis McGee, he's a hard-boiled detective type. All these books were written back in the 60s by John D. McDonald. Yeah. And I am going through and reading them all again for the second time now. And I am enjoying the absolute heck out of them. There's a lot of philosophy in there. A lot of it's dime store stuff, but it's good, you know. It feeds the soul. And I think that the best reading is the kind that really feeds the soul, that makes you feel complete and helps you understand the world a little better.
Yes.
And you're able to combine that into who you are. Wow, what a difference life makes.
Wow. That's so
life in the book.
That's so true. So
yeah.
This conversation, wow, I just love where we've gone. So thank you. First of all, thank you.
My pleasure.
My final question usually is a billboard quote. Metaphorically speaking, if you could put a word or a phrase on a billboard for millions of people to see, what would it be? But I also want to give you the option, if nothing comes to mind, to just say from the top of the Empire State. Either will do. Either will do.
You know, my wife gives me grief about this, but every time I'm at a party and someone asks what I do, I'll say I say all the little words that go in between the songs on radio stations all over the world.
Yeah.
And I'm on in New York, and one of the things I say every day, and this is where she rolls her eyes, I'll say, from the top of the Empire State Building, this is the radio station that pays your bills. That's my billboard.
Oh, sounds so good. It does. Well, this has been an absolute joy, pleasure, privilege. I feel so enlightened. So
thank you,
Dave. I really appreciate it. I'm gonna put in links to your website so people can find you. Is there anything else you want to just add before we end here?
No, this has been phenomenal. I love interviews where I just really kind of just get to talk. Something it's a gift my mother gave me, the gift of gab.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I don't feel like I was taxed to come up with any answers, except for there were a couple that kind of posed me. But they're good questions, and you're a good interviewer. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Ladies and gentlemen, Dave Foxx.
Now, before we say goodbye on this episode, I thought it was just crucial to give you a little taste of the work that Dave has created for the radio. The next minute is a sampling of some of the programs he's created. Enjoy.
Who the hell wants to go to Trenton? This long 4th of July weekend, celebrate with Z100. Thursday night at 9:20. Experience the magic, the Macy's 4th of July fireworks on Z100. Everybody wake up. Waking up with Billy.
Wake up, people.
On 106.7 KMX. 95.7 The Vibe and the Missouri Lottery have passes to see one of the hottest movies of the year.
Yeah, you know you're not supposed to say the name of that movie, okay?
I've been told that I can't say the title, okay?
92.3 GXL, getting you in the summer frame of mind. It's week 2 of Get a Room, and we're taking it outside with your brand new outdoor patio.
Hey, we're 5 seconds of summer.
Rock out with their out. Wait, what? Why did you beat me?
I don't think you can say that.
I said what? There's nothing wrong with the word seriously? It. I said forget. Never mind. Remember the one time Taylor Swift invited fans to her house for secret sessions to hear her new album before anybody else? We're totally stealing her idea.
'Cause baby, now we got bad blood.
DJX,
You know we used to
secret
be
sessions. Ray Foley. Naked. Yeah, it scares us too.
Good morning, Dublin.
The Naked Breakfast.
Suey. Come on and get this free stuff.
Island 106 loves prize piggies at island106.com.
You've been listening to Entertainment X, the podcast. You can follow Entertainment X on Instagram at _EntertainmentX_. If you haven't yet, go to Apple Podcasts and subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. Join Clay next week for another curiosity conversation on Entertainment X. Thank you for listening.